Hello everyone, welcome to Learn DAX channel. My name is Siddesh and this is part 2 of the End DAX Project video series in which now we are converting the insights that we had gained after solving those business problems using DAX into a sales dashboard that looks something like this. So in our first video, we had used this mockup in order to create a rough sketch or the rough idea of the dashboard that we're going to start with. So if you haven't watched the first video, I would really encourage you to go ahead and watch the first video because we are starting from where we left off in the first video. So at the end of video one, this is where we landed. We had pulled all the values and it doesn't look anywhere near to the dashboard that we want to see as a final product. So in this, we are going to come absolutely close and almost going to finish the dashboard and it's going to look exactly like this. So we are going to start first with these cards and I want to change the formatting a little bit. Now the values that I'm going to use in terms of the transparencies or the shadows or the font sizes or the rounded corners, I figured that out after some trial and error. So you can simply use those values or you can also do your own trial and error and figure out what can look better or use your own ideas and imagination and creativity to make it look even different and even better than this dashboard. So let's start with the first visual, which is the gross revenue KPI card. I would keep the font size to just 25 because it's too big. I don't want such a big value and it won't look good. Besides, I would also want the category label to remain as well. And the display units, I want it to be none so that I can see the absolute value. Besides, it really isn't it is giving me a clear distinction between the background and the foreground. So what I want is it has to just subtly kind of blend in with the background. So for that, I'm going to use a fill color option and give it some transparency so that it eventually looks something like this. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is I will select this visual and go to general effects, background. I'm using the default colors that I already have in this from my color palette. I'm not using any external colors. And I will set the transparency to 70 or maybe 40%. Now again, these values I have got after doing some trial and error. You can try with 45, 35, whatever works best for you. You can do use your creativity. And since these edges are too sharp to view, I want to make the corners a bit rounded. And so I'm going to again go back to the settings, go to effects, and turn the visual border on, change its color so that it kind of blends into the background. And the rounded corners are going to be 18. So again, how 18? Again, trial and error. So the last thing is I want a shadow so that it kind of emerges from the background so that there is a distinction between the foreground and the background. However, this is too loud for me. It's kind of popping out. We don't want that. We want just a subtle variation between the two, the foreground and the background. So I'm going to change this color to the light gray that we have been using and keep it as outside and bottom. So if I go back to the effects, so the shadow is offset as outside and position is bottom right. So now we can see that the same visual is kind of looking more subtle and it's kind of blending in into the background. So now I'll also change the size to make it a little bit more smaller. So height I would say 90 and width would be 200, and these values I've done through trial and error. I've repeated enough number of times. I think I should stop saying that. So instead of now repeating the same thing for all the cards, all I'm simply going to do is select all these cards all at once and then change the size to 90 by 200. And now I'll use the format painter and in one click I can change the formatting of each and every card. So then the fourth one and the last one. And this is something that we're going to do throughout our dashboard, and it's going to save us a lot of time. So I'm also going to use the same formatting on the slicers. But we are going to make some changes later on to the slicer as well. And what are those changes we are going to see as we proceed in this video? So one thing that I observe here is that the rounded corners are like too much for me. We don't want the roundness shouldn't be that that much. So in order to do that, I'm going to reduce it. So right now I go back to slicers, general effects, the visual border, and instead of 18, I'm just going to make it 8. So once I make it 8, it is slightly more subtle. And I'm going to use the format painter to apply this value to all the slicers. Besides, I also want that this font size for slicers is too big. I want it to be a little smaller. So I am going to change the font size to 12 and I'm going to follow the similar suit for all the slicers. I think I can select all at once and change it to 10. Yeah, that is done. Also, I'll select the remaining two slicers and also change the values to 10. And I'll also change the border, not the border, but the background to this color so that when I see the drop down, I don't see white, but I see a color which is more in sync with the remaining colors that we have in our background. I also want to change the dimensions of this slicer to make it 65 by 175. Yeah, that is going to be, yeah, that works for us. So I'll change the setting for each and every one of them to 65 by 175. So we are done with our cards and our slicers. Now I'll just use this and format it to make the change on my trend chart as well. The one thing that I'm going to change here is on the sales amount, I'll just add a space so that I get sales amount by order date. And then I'll extend this format painter to my pie chart. And so now we are getting very close to what we have. See, if you observe, we are pretty much done with our cards, our pie charts, and our total revenue by order date visual. So let's go back and do the formatting on the tables as well. So by default, the formatting of the table, if you go to style presets, it's default. I can change it to minimal or bold header or maybe contrasting alternating rows, but we are not going to use any of that. In fact, we are going to set the style presets to none. And then we are going to copy this format and paste it here so that it looks almost identical. But wait, it's not looking identical. In fact, the only change that has happened is at the borders. So again, I go to this option, go to style presets, change it to none. And now I am much closer to what I see in the actual dashboard. So I have these horizontal grid lines which I don't want because they are kind of breaking the flow of the visual or breaking the flow of the table. So to do that, I'll go to this option, go to grid and turn off these horizontal grid lines. And once I do that, it's looking much more cleaner. But I see one issue here is that the font size isn't really good enough for me to have a good visual glance at the values. So for that, I'm going to change the column headers and the values. So again, I go to the visuals, formatting the visuals. I'll change the font size of values to 12 as also the column headers to 12. And once that is done, I'm going to take this and format my remaining table so that it looks exactly like that. So now we have pretty much covered all of our settings in this. So there's one thing that is remaining, and that is we need to create this shape that you see here, kind of acts like a placeholder to keep all our slices in the left part of our dashboard. So for that, I am going to create a new shape. And what I see is I would probably need a little more space for that because we've already consumed a lot of space. So the dashboard that I have built already, its dimensions are 1000 by 1600. So I'm going to change the dashboard size from height is 1000, it remains the same. I'm going to change the width to 1600. So I get much more area where I can place my visuals. So I'll slide this table slightly to the right and this one as well. Then I have my sales by payment method should come at the last, region will come in between, and my country will come at the beginning of it, beginning of the pie charts. And I also want to place these in this particular order, which is net profit, gross profit. I'll keep the slices away for some time. Country can go manufacturer. So now I have the total COGS, the total revenue, and the gross revenue. So I need a shape that I can put in this part of the screen, this part of the dashboard. So I'll quickly pull out insert, shape, rounded rectangle. And let's put it here and make some space for this. Let's go to the shape. A rounded rectangle, 25 is too much. Maybe 12 would look better. Let's see. Let's also change the fill color to the color that we've been using. And this time the transparency I'm setting it to 70% so that I can see a bit of contrast. When I place the slicers on top of it, there has to be a little contrast between the two. So again, I go to the style, the border. I can change the border to the same color. And shadow is something that we don't want. Let's just try if we really would want it. No, we are good without a shadow in this case. Let's also check the dimensions, the width and the height. The height we can modify later on, but the width we would need 175 because our slicer is 165 by 175. So this should be at least 175 or 185. Yeah, 185 so that I have 5 mm's, 5 unit spacing on both the sides of my shape. So I will kind of arrange these visuals so that I make space. So let's check the order in which we are going to place these slicers in the mockup. First we have the date, the ID, the product name, the category. So let's try the first four ones before we proceed with the remaining. So we have the date or the order date. Before that, let me put this behind, like at the back, so that when I'm going to place the slicer, it is always going to remain on top. So for that, I'll go to format and send to back so that this shape is going to go behind and anything that I place over it is going to come on top of it. So the first slicer that I placed is the order date. Then I have the order ID, not the order ID, the product ID. Then the product name. Right now, I don't have to be very careful about placing them in a specific, horizontal alignment because I can align them and I'll show you how you do that. So you have the product name, then manufacturer, then category, then your country, region, and payment method. So I'll slightly bring this at the top so that I make space for the slices at the bottom. Yeah, now I can see that all the slices are in the shape. So now I'll just align them. I'll select all these slices one by one and I'll go to format, align. First of all, I'm going to align them at the center. Yeah, and now I'll just distribute them vertically so that they are in a proper vertical arrangement. So yeah, we are done with that. Now I'll just pull these visuals so that they look more in sync with the flow. Because if I look at this visual, this dashboard, I can see that they are kind of aligned. So let's go back and change a little bit of the positioning. Again, I will go to formatting and distribute them horizontally. Now this sales amount by order date, I probably need to make some space. Now I need to fill in these three pie charts and they should look identical to each other. So let's check the dimensions that we have here. Go to properties. Let's try with 260 by 260. So I would also want this height to be 260. And I also want that legend has to be at the bottom so that the pie, the donut area looks much bigger. So I go to this setting, legend. So instead of having the position to be center right, I want it to be bottom center. And clearly the difference is visible. Now the donut is occupying a much bigger area and it's much more pronounced. So I'll format this, the remaining two pies, so that they are also using the legend as bottom center. And the same suit follows for the third one. Now I need to also change the dimensions of this. 260 by 260, and also this one, 260 by 260. So yeah, I was able to fit in all these three pie charts. Now let me just align them, distribute them rather horizontally, so that the gaps between them are much more equal. So I'll just write distribute horizontally. Immediately they look so much better. I'll change this to sales amount, simply sales amount by payment method. Sales amount by region, I'll also change it here so that there is a space between sales and amount. Same suit follows for the country-wide split of sales. And now this gives me plenty of empty space here, so I can move my table. Now I have this table, which I can then kind of format a bit. Now let me also kind of bring this shape in alignment with these tables. So yeah, so far it looks good. All my shapes have been placed right where they should have been. I will try to maybe reduce the scrolling here by adding space between product and name so that I can get this on the second line, something like this. I'll also try and reduce this column width. I just want to minimize the scrolling because anyways this particular table we are going to require scrolling. So if we can reduce that in this table, it will be a good experience for the user while consuming the data. Yeah, now they won't need to scroll. So everything is visible. Only the vertical scrolling will exist. The horizontal scrolling won't be there. So now there are certain things that still need to be done. The first is the title. So I'll insert a text box. I'll call it sales dashboard. Place it at the top, slightly aligned with this. And again, we don't want to have any background for this. So it kind of merges with the background. So yeah, we are done or not quite because there are certain things that we still need to do, which is, so for example, when I click on product, it's giving the product analysis. When I click on category, it is giving me the category analysis. If I click on manufacturer, it gives me the manufacturer analysis. Country gives me the country analysis. If I click on a country, then it's interacting with all the visuals. And then accordingly, the filter is getting propagated to all the visuals. So that is the interactions between the visuals. So that is something which is going to take some time, and that is something that I'm going to cover in the next video. So if you have followed so far, I'm going to put the remaining content, which is the interactions between the visuals and the bookmarks in the third and final part of the video. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video and creating this dashboard along with me. And if you have any feedback, please leave it in your comments. And like I say at the end of every video, happy learning and thanks for watching.